For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.
Today on the show, I've got Ty Shay, Global CMO for Norton LifeLock. On the show today, we talk about his transition from investment banking and accounting to consumer brand marketing at P&G, and then his number of stints in companies that have had notable exits like Esurance, Hotwire, and LifeLock most recently. We talk about what he's coined as the term marketing jiujitsu and why we should be considering turning off our marketing efforts, not just arguing for more budget. And we also talk about this notion of how performance marketing and brand marketing can live together synergistically in something he calls performance storytelling. I hope you enjoy this show with Ty Shay. Ty, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Alan. Excited to be here today.
Yeah, well, let's start off with your background and where you started your career and how you became CMO of Norton LifeLock.
All right. Well, that's probably a long story. I have a really weird background for a marketer. I majored in accounting, passed the CPA exam, and was an investment banker. And
Wow.
I really hated that job. So after I went to business school because I wanted to do a career change. And while I was at Stanford, I really liked marketing. And so if you're at Stanford, I did about the most unsexy thing you could do is I went and worked at Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, which is a big company. All my classmates are like, "What are you doing, Ty?" But, I liked marketing and I thought we're better to learn marketing than Procter & Gamble. And that was especially true in the late 90s. So that was how I got into marketing. And then, through a lot of different stops and journeys, starting in classical packaged goods and doing a few startups and my own startup, now I find myself kind of full circle part of Symantec. Through Symantec bought the company I was at before, LifeLock, about 2 years ago. And so when they bought LifeLock, I think Symantec really appreciated the marketing machine that LifeLock had built. And they asked me to stay on board and to actually run marketing for the Norton brand as well. So for the last 2 years, I've been running the Norton and the LifeLock marketing businesses.
Right. Well, and that's not your first acquisition, right? It was Hotwire before that, and I think Esurance before that. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been, there's a lot of luck in life, Alan, and I've been lucky a few times. Esurance, which was the first startup I joined, ended up getting acquired by Allstate. And then Hotwire, which was the second one I joined, was bought by IAC/Expedia. Mm. And then I did my own startup. We did sell that, but that wasn't a great sale. And then SquareTrade, which is a phone insurance warranty company, sold to Allstate. And then LifeLock sold to Symantec. But little known fact, LifeLock was also one of the interested buyers, or somebody who looked at it at least, was Allstate. So I actually think, Alan, my destiny is to work at Allstate one day. So it'll probably happen one of these days.
I love that. That's hilarious. Well, you remind me a little bit, and we talked before, this didn't dawn on me, but the whole iBanker to marketer transition, there was a partner of mine in a prior business that did the same thing. So I've met two of you now.
Yes. I can tell you it's a lot like medicine. It was not fun at the time,
right?
But it probably served me well. I remember, so iBanking was my first job out of college, and I worked like crazy hours, like sometimes literally 100 hours a week. And I remember my first day at Procter & Gamble, I was a summer intern from Stanford, and I looked up from my desk at 5:30. And I looked around and I was literally the only one there. And it made no sense to me. I was like, where is everyone? It's only 5:30. Since then, when you start in investment banking, the lucky thing is most jobs seem pretty easy.
Right. Yeah. No, I can totally get that. Well, one of the things that I think somebody that introduced us described this concept to me that you have called marketing jiujitsu. And let's talk about that and just help listeners understand what do you mean by marketing jiu-jitsu?
Okay, great. So I think I have this. So I feel like probably it's because of my background in accounting and finance. I really do feel like the purpose of marketing is to serve whatever the organizational goals are. So sometimes the organizational goals are growth. Sometimes they're margin or profitability. But I think, what happens, the trap that a lot of marketers fall into is I think they become the champion of growth at all costs. And what that means is I think they feel like their role is to be at the table in the boardroom and arguing for more spend, more spend, more spend. And I think the intentions are really good because I think, in general, marketing is about spreading awareness and to make sure people know. But I do also think that sometimes that's a little tone deaf. If the organization is saying, look, we need to really focus on profitability, or we need to apply some money to maybe this technical infrastructure or something like that.
Right.
So I've become, I think, a much happier and more balanced marketer when I just try to get to a deep understanding with the CFO or the CEO of what the goals of the business are. And I try to make marketing ladder into that. And so when you do that, it actually changes your perspective on things. So for example, I think there's obviously a lot of debate and discussion about marketing and about, let's say, if you're doing a new program or budgets, there's a lot of debate and discussion. And as any marketer has gone through those things, and sometimes they're months and months of debate, discussion, analysis. What I've really turned into, if there's a lot of scrutiny on any one program or any one budget, my first suggestion to everyone is let's just turn the marketing off and see what happens. So not do a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. Okay, let's turn it off. Let's see what happens. Right. And that evokes a really interesting reaction. And that's where the jiu-jitsu comes from, because it catches a lot of people off guard because there's no longer tension or argument. And in my career, I've had a couple CFOs take me up on it. And it's really, both times, it's actually really shown the power of marketing by turning it off and agreeing what we're going to measure and how we're going to measure what happens. And in a way, there's a certain freedom to that, Alan,
right,
of just having that attitude of, okay, if you want to do that, let's turn it off and let's just see what happens. So that's one form of marketing jiu-jitsu.
I mean, I love the idea and the sense. I don't know if listeners got this, but just the sense of you're pushing. You're always fighting, right? You I've never seen a marketer go into a boardroom and tell the CFO, I'm not really feeling the way you allocated, your activity-based costing last week. Can we shift that up? I don't feel like we should be spreading this like peanut butter. I think we should be allocating it against revenue or something a little different. Never heard that conversation, but you always hear somebody going, I don't like that ad.
Right.
But so the freedom of feeling like, you're always pushing, and then you go, well, yeah, let's turn it off. Right. I mean, it's just like gasp, I would imagine, in the room. Silent, maybe, but the breath that you can get when you take that tact, I love it.
Yeah. And what we've learned is, I've done that a couple times in my career. And, one of the big things with marketing is attribution, right? Like I know half my spend's working. I just don't know which half. John Wanamaker said that. Mm-hmm. Really, when you have these big programs, and between LifeLock and Norton, we spend $250 million a year on marketing. Right. Honestly, sometimes the best way to figure out what's working and what's not working for yourself is to turn things off and see what happens. So I've gone dark a couple times in my career, but then I also, kind of consistently through, a normal year will cycle certain programs on and off and try to understand what the cause and effect is on the rest of the channels. So I think it's good to, once again, just really listen to your CFO, be a partner in the business. And I think there's some sense of, mutual respect or something that happens when you approach it that way.
Right. Well, what was the trigger to do this? I mean, like it's not your first reaction, I would imagine, to say, yeah, let's turn it off.
I think so I've had some really lucky experiences in my life. So I went from Clorox to help launch Esurance. And I was sitting at Esurance, and it's an insurance company. So here I was from Clorox. I was sitting next to the data mining and the actuary team. So that's how insurance companies value their businesses. They have actuaries that like literally say each customer is worth this. So the concept of like customer lifetime value, cost per customer, churn. Like I sat next to that team, and I really learned those principles. And, at that time, I think it's pretty common now, but in 1999, it was pretty novel to think of things from a brand perspective and also from a customer value perspective. So that was, I think, the foundation. But then when I got recruited to help launch Hotwire, it was actually incubated out of a private equity firm, Texas Pacific Group.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about Texas Pacific Group, it's very operational. I mean, general what private equity does is they buy companies and they try to make them more efficient or work better. And so TPG particularly believes in dashboards and weekly dashboard meetings and KPIs. So Hotwire was incubated out of Texas Pacific Group. And since I was doing the marketing and basically the only source of revenue was we'd spend marketing, we'd get customers. Right. I was running the company forecast meeting for 2 years. So in that environment, every dollar I spent had amazing scrutiny as to what it was giving us in terms of customer and revenue. And I think it was when I was there with part of a private equity firm, or at least that mentality, that was seemed like a very reasonable thing to do. They thought it was a good idea, and it may have actually been their idea. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do that. So it was within this, I think, private equity environment which is a little different than venture capital, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I think venture capitalists and private equity view things differently. That I probably learned that like, yeah, it's really just about, it's nothing personal against me. It's just about really figuring what impact these programs are having on the business.
Right. Well, I'm envisioning you, and this probably isn't fair, but as some sort of like marketing Jedi, and you're able to emotionally detach yourself from the situation to be able to flip a switch like that, to say, yeah, let's try turning it off. Is there any other preparation? Is there any other preparation you've had along the way?
No, I mean, look, I don't think that that's the case. I think that coming from a banking background and then working at this PE-backed company, Hotwire, I think that was really about he who had the best data or the best understanding of data kind of won. So this principle, I think, really started as really about data and about analysis, and whose analysis was better was kind of where this principle started. Okay. But I think as I've matured and hopefully grown a little wiser, I think that it's translated, or where I try to translate is to what you talked about, which is, being a little bit, not taking everything so personal, right, and realizing, as an experimental marketer, and everything's kind of a test, a lot of things aren't going to work. Mm-hmm. And I've just found that if you have an approach that, hey, the way we decide marketing programs is not the HIPPO method. Are you familiar with the HIPPO method of decision making?
No. Tell me about that.
So it's the highest paid person's opinion is the one that decides.
Nice.
What we do is, we try to be very experimental and say, hey, we have hypotheses, and we think if we run this program, this is what's going to happen. And we try to tell, let's say, everyone within the organization that before we do the experiment instead of after. Then what you really figure out is, a lot of times you're wrong. And so you have these experiments and most don't work. But if you think of, marketing as like that experiment, and ultimately the consumers decide what works and what doesn't work, and that you don't have to be right 100%, I think it really allows you tremendous freedom in terms of risk taking. Mm-hmm. And also, as you said, a little bit of peace of mind that you don't feel like you're under this pressure to say everything you're doing is perfect.
Right. No, it reminds me of I listen to other podcasts, in life lesson type situations, and a lot of people are talking about stoicism and being stoic, and that in large part is about being able to control your emotional reaction to kind of step back and assess the situation. I think there's a great deal of lessons in that and what you're saying.
Yes. I'm also, Tim Ferriss is a big person where I learned at least stoicism, the concept. And I do think it's something that I strive for. So
good.
I think ultimately, stoicism, I'm still learning what it means, but an example is, where you just try to focus on what you're doing and maybe a little bit less about what people think.
Yeah.
And, about what's right and that. And so I think it's definitely something I aspire to.
Oh, good. Well, I know you're sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley, and you've got obviously that Stanford connection you talked about earlier too. It seems to be in large circles, I think, this is my personal opinion, but a little bit of an over rotation on performance marketing in the Silicon Valley, and especially the startup scene with growth hacking and the like. And I'm just curious how you think about it. You've worked at big brands and growing brands and high growth brands. How do you think about that balance between performance marketing, or what's called performance marketing, and brand marketing, or kind of the less measurable things?
Yeah, I think we're all products of our background and experience. So, growing up in brand management companies like Clorox and Procter & Gamble, and having a foundation in consumer insights, and that I'm a big believer in brands. But obvious, as we talked about, being part of these, being very quantitative and started that, I'm very interested in connecting marketing to results, which is traditionally performance marketing. So I always have a tough time because a lot of times people ask me, well, what kind of marketer are you? A brand marketer or a performance marketer? And I always had trouble answering that question because I think both are important. So I've come up with this phrase, performance storytelling, because I think storytelling is so important. I think it's ultimately good marketers are almost always good storytellers, but then it's really important to be able to understand and measure and optimize your story and your marketing over time. So I have this from all the painful lessons and all the mistakes I've made through the different companies I've been at. I've really tried to put together a framework of how do you combine great storytelling and actually use data to tell better stories and to drive either faster growth or more efficient growth, called performance storytelling.
Interesting. Well, tell me, maybe use LifeLock as an example. Tell me how performance storytelling works.
Yeah. So I joined about 4 years ago, and the situation when I came in was I think every time you take a job, you're trying to figure out, like, can I be successful at this job?
Right.
So some things that I realized were, one is I had actually been a LifeLock customer before I joined the company. And that's because my brother had his identity stolen, and LifeLock really basically saved his life. So if you've ever known anyone who's gotten their identity stolen, you're basically guilty until proven innocent, and then the onus of proof is on you to prove that you didn't do these things. So I came in being a LifeLock member, knowing what LifeLock membership was about and why I became a member. So when I looked at the advertising and market, I thought the story they were telling was overly complex. And so I think that I saw a big opportunity in explaining what identity theft was and what role LifeLock played. So I thought there was room to optimize the story. And then, it was also a company that had grown so quickly that a lot of marketing was outsourced. I think we were spending over $200 million a year on marketing, and we had 30 people in the marketing department and 30 different agencies. Wow. So it was one where marketing was not really, I would say it was outsourced versus a core competency. Right. So what I did, and the third thing was, it literally had no marketing analytics department. So we had a finance department that was kind of helping us measure what was working, what wasn't working, but we didn't have a true marketing analytics. So at LifeLock, what we really did was, came in and really focused on the who our customer was through like segmentation. Mm-hmm. And once we knew who our customer was, we literally tried 50 different ways to tell the story of what LifeLock is and how it works. And we were able to develop some quantitative tools to help us figure out how well we were telling that story versus how well our competitors were. So we call it ad score. So each time we have a commercial, and this has been optimized over 4 years, I can tell you with pretty much certainty before I even air the commercial through some of this quantitative testing we do, how effective it will be at getting people to buy. Wow. So we've been working a lot on just really quantifying how good our story is. And that's been one of the big improvements, is getting better and better at telling our story. And that's not just in the advertising, but also on our website or in our mobile app, et cetera. And then, we're a company that has a really high lifetime value. So we spend across 12 different channels, everything from direct mail to radio to infomercials to 15-second ads. So there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes about how to balance that spend and where to spend the next dollar. So, if you're spending $200 million, where do you spend the next million? Right. Is it TV? Is it radio? Is it that? So that's what we've kind of done is figured out that I'd call it a machine of how to efficiently tell our story and where to tell it. And then now that we're part of Symantec and we've combined LifeLock with Norton, we're now multi-brand, multi-product, and we're an international company in 38 countries. So the algorithm has gotten much more complex about how to tell our story. So it's been a fun challenge.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I don't know, I think I remember you mentioning you had like a 3-step framework around performance storytelling. Can you tell listeners about the 3 steps?
Yeah, it's really it's really, one is figure out what your story is, really. And one of the things is I call it think like a filmmaker. So if you've ever known like how certain movies are pitched, Alien, I think, was pitched as Jaws in space, like that simple, right? Like if you're going to go get people to finance your movie, you go and you say Jaws in space, and people are like, yeah, that works, Alien. So I think that business concepts, especially today, need to be that simple as well. So it's like, what's your equivalent to like a VC elevator pitch? If you're going to describe your business in 10 seconds, how would you be able to do that? And there's a lot of, it seems really easy, but it's actually really hard to do something that's different and interesting and really appeals to your audience.
Well, and to get it.
So that's like the first step.
Yeah. And to get it that simple, that for sure.
Get it that simple, very, very difficult. Yeah. So, a lot of companies never really get past that first step. And even though LifeLock had existed for, I think, 8 years before I got there, I didn't feel like we had simplified it to that step. And it ended up being that the best way to sell LifeLock was, our biggest opportunity was people who had credit monitoring and thought credit monitoring was a proxy for LifeLock. Right. Or identity theft protection service weren't buying it. So, the kind of thing was, why monitor your credit if it's not going to fix the problem? Get LifeLock. Gotcha. And we ended up building a lot of campaigns around that, and it was very successful. The second is this whole idea of quantifying how good your storytelling is. And, a lot of people will do that. I talked about how we did that through creating ad scores for our TV from 1 to 100. But another way a lot of people do this nowadays is, if you think about like landing page testing, A/B testing, like how many people buy off this page versus how many people buy off that page. So it's really a systematic, I would say that the story that has a better conversion rate, or the page that has a better conversion rate, probably has a better story. And so thinking about that storytelling across all your marketing messages, whether it's direct mail or et cetera, and really trying to figure out how to quantitatively beat that is the second part. And then the third part, as I said, is then you figure out how you actually reach your customer and how much you want to spend through each channel.
Gotcha.
And how do you spread the work.
Gotcha. Well, just this notion of storytelling and the quantitative and testing and refinement and optimization of that's a unique talent set of people. It's hard to find people that can do both of those things, I'd imagine. And how do you think about it? How do you think about the talent and the culture of, you've got marketing jiujitsu, willing to turn things off and step back and look at everything that we're doing more objectively. And then this notion of storytelling, which is much more artful in many respects. How do you balance those things in the talent and the culture that you're setting up?
Yes, I do think I'm a big sports fan. I do believe that running a successful business is mostly about the people. Mm-hmm. So I do think that it's something I think about a lot is, do you have the best team? And so one thing that, as you mentioned, I do believe there are two core competencies in this performance storytelling. One is storytelling and the other is analytics or analysts. Mm. And so what we try to do is we try to create an organization where you can be one or the other and be happy, which is important, because I think sometimes in a brand organization, maybe the analysts that are very quantitative are frustrated because there's not enough rigor or analytics behind decisions. Mm-hmm. And in a really hardcore performance driven, or let's argue some of the Silicon Valley growth organizations, there's really no value put on brand or storytelling. So I do think that one of the challenges to creating an effective marketing team is to have a environment where you have storytellers that are great at telling stories, analysts, and you create a system where they can kind of work in harmony. And that's really the challenge is the system where you can attract great talent on both sides.
Got it. Well, you've been at a lot of different types of organizations. Obviously, we've gone over this, but like CPG to, startups to companies that are being acquired or looking to be acquired. I think I hear a lot of big companies, like frankly, the Procter and Gamble's now of the world, wanting to be smaller or act small in air quotes here for those that can't see my fingers. And you've had this mix of experience. What advice would you give, your peer set, other CMOs that are wanting to try to achieve this performance or test and learn culture, the speed, but not lose the storytelling component? How would you advise them?
Look, I do think that a lot of marketing, every marketer wants to be associated with a great product, right? So I think a lot of success in marketing in my career has been just identifying which businesses you think you can be successful in and paying attention to that. So I think in the new era of marketing where there's a lot of accountability put on marketing, where you kind of have to show, here's what I spend and here's what I get, that the only place I would feel comfortable being a marketer is where I have access to first party data. Okay. And where, I kind of own the customer and can have some transparency into that. I do feel like, even though I came through the packaged goods world, it would be a real challenge for me to go into, let's just say, Procter & Gamble, how it operates today, where it's really bifurcated through the retail channel or intermediated through retailers. Yeah. And you don't really know who your customers are, who's buying it. I would say, it doesn't matter what my skill set is, if I didn't have access to that data, I would probably struggle and would not be successful there. Mm. So, to answer your question, I think finding places where, if you're a marketer, finding places where you have access to data, I think gives you a good shot at being able to set up this construct. And then, something else is, I don't think it's a good idea when you're going, especially to these early companies, to be the first marketing person that they hire. I really think there should be some study done as of the first marketing person hired by small companies. I think inevitably gets fired, or at least 80% of them do, because there's this struggle of what we call in Silicon Valley, trying to get to product market fit and trying to figure out what good looks like. I think for early startups, before it's established that it works and that the economics work, then you can acquire customers for less than you spend. It's really a lot of pressures put on the marketing, because it's more about whether the marketing is good versus whether it's a good business or a good market, if that makes sense. So I always advise my friends never to be the first marketing hire for a company. Always want to be second or third or fourth, and have some semblance of there's a marketing budget that's kind of working, and that, once again, like I talked about with LifeLock, you should have some instincts about what you think you can do to make it better, I think, before your first day on the job.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. I was on a conference call recently with Greg Welch from Spencer Stewart. And he was talking about that notion in particular. Don't accept a job unless you know how, at least in theory, how you're going to drive the growth. Talking to a bunch of CMOs, I thought it was really good advice. Knowing
Greg would know. I think he's like one of the best executive recruiters.
Yeah, no, good guy too. Good guy. Well, curious if you have any additional advice. I mean, you've exited a number of times, or been with companies that have exited a number of times. Is there any magic in this scaling, this growth, to get through an exit, so to speak?
I mean, I think it's like I said, look, there's something heroic about turnaround situations or startups, right? You can go in there and I've been lucky, like I said, more lucky probably than good in being able to do it. But I generally think that the picking your job is really about picking something that's kind of already working, that's got good people. Right. You like your boss, you kind of have a values alignment with your boss. It's about, I always use the analogy, you're standing at a pier and there are different boats leaving the pier. And I really think it's not about optimizing for position, meaning, hey, I'm the most important person or that, because you might be the skipper of like a small boat that's, might not make it.
Right.
I would rather jump on the boat that's looks like it's going to go the fastest and the farthest, and try to get myself in a situation like that, even if it meant, maybe at the beginning I wasn't going to be the skipper of that boat. I might, be a crewman or something. But if you have confidence in yourself, I think you can work your way up. So I don't know if you follow the NBA, but I'm a big NBA fan. I always think like the best person at picking their jobs was this coach, Phil Jackson, who coached so his first coaching job, I think he coached Michael Jordan. He joined as coach of a team that already had Michael Jordan and rode them to 6 championships. And I think his second NBA job, he joined a team that had Shaq and Kobe. And I think he won a couple more, 2 or 3 more championships. And then I think eventually his ego got to him, because then he joined the New York Knicks and they didn't have Jordan or Kobe. And he became a very mediocre coach all of a sudden. So I really do think a lot of success is about picking your spots.
That's a great example. Well, let's switch gears a little bit. I'd love to get to know the person behind the brand, behind the position. And I would love to know if there's an experience of your past that defines and makes up who you are today.
Yeah, for me, Alan, I think candidly, it's like my father passed away when I was younger. So I was 6 years old. So for me, I think that, and I was the oldest son, middle child. So for me, I think having that and feeling a lot, responsibility early is pretty, I didn't realize it at the time. I probably haven't realized it until very recently, when I've been a little more slowed down and reflected on things. But that experience, I think really set the tone for, my desire to go out there, and I was responsible at an early age, et cetera. So that's probably been, really defining event early in my life.
Well, I thank you for sharing that, by the way. What was it, do you think, that made you step up, I think, to use your word?
Yeah, it was. I think it was literally the expectation is that my father had a terminal illness, and I remember I was 6 years old, and he really, to paraphrase, but he really told me it was my job now. I was like the man of the house. So, I remember that moment vividly. It's one of my earliest memories of that, and I think that kind of, he literally passed the baton to me. And I think at that point it was, I think I thought that way of, hey, I want to kind of grow up. I want to be a good provider. I want to be able to take care of people, take care of my family, et cetera. So, we don't know how things would turn out, but I definitely know, because I didn't realize it as I was growing up, that was a big motivator. But as I reflect back, I've kind of realized that was probably an early thing that had quite an impact on the rest of my life.
Right. Well, and it's quite a call to action for yourself, for sure.
If you look at, I've looked at the history, if you look at a lot of, and I'm not comparing myself to these people, but if you look at a lot of presidents, if you look, a lot of them had lost a parent or something at an early age. So I think there is something about that process that I think really forces people, I think, to grow up in a hurry.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what advice would you give your younger self if you were starting over again?
I've always been kind of a long-term thinker. I think really life is about the journey, and the journey never really stops. There is no destination. I've had my share of setbacks and mistakes along the way, but in general, I think it's really your life is really about people, and your professional life is about, working with good people and finding good people. And, if you do that and, you can also find a good business or two along the way, then I think you're set up for success. So I think always a lot of people, I think when they're looking at career options, including myself at times, I've maybe underestimated the importance of people. And for me, we didn't talk more into why I didn't like investment banking, but I thought that profession for me didn't really attract people that I aspired to be when I grew up. I was looking around, I was okay, well, so-and-so's divorced, so-and-so just missed their kids' ballet recital because of a deal. So I think it's really about finding people that you have value alignment with. And if you do that, and like I said, can find a good business or two, I think you're in good shape.
Great. Well, what keeps you going? What fuels you now?
There's this book by Carol Dweck called Mindset, which is about having a growth mindset. So there's have you heard of the book, Alan?
I've heard of it, but I don't know.
Yeah. So some people are a fixed mindset, which is, maybe have the impression that you're born a certain way, and maybe, I'm not good at math, so it's just something I'm not good at. And then they kind of live their life that way. Other people with a growth mindset feel like, if they're not good at something, it's just because they really haven't applied themselves. So I don't know why. I think it's maybe born, but I've been born with this growth mindset of always feeling like I can do things a little bit better, and always feeling like I can try a little bit better. And I think at one point I read a lot of Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, and they're both very, I think, parables of wisdom. But I used to really take pride in, I'm the same person I was when I grew up in Peoria, Illinois. I took a lot of pride in that. And then at some point, maybe 5 years ago, I switched it to where I was really taking pride in my evolution as a person. And so now, every year, one of the things I look at is, am I a different person at the end of the year than I am at the beginning? And being very intentional about, hey, what do I want to get better at? What do I really want to focus on? And so I found that actually to be really motivating for me to just think that, the journey is never gone, and you continue to become better, whether it's more skilled or a better person or a better husband or a better father. So I don't know. That's like an endless challenge that I feel like I'll never achieve. So that definitely keeps me going.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I like the twist, because I've had similar thoughts in the past. You want to hold on to your roots to some level, right? But then you reflect on all your experiences you've had, and you've had a lot of experiences, and there's no way you're that same person anymore. But maybe it's nostalgia that wants us to hold on to who we are, or not forget maybe who we were.
Yeah. Or like I said, it's just kind of a shift. It's kind of like the jiu-jitsu we talked about earlier. Really embrace that. Like, you know what? I really aspire to be a better person. I aspire to do this and that. And like I said, it kind of flips it around to where evolution and change are good. Like I said, I'm a big basketball fan. I don't know if you know Coach K from Duke.
Oh yeah. Well, so I'm sitting in Durham, North Carolina.
Oh, did I use the wrong coach?
You did.
I apologize.
I'll give you a pass.
But somebody like Coach K, who clearly super successful, right?
Oh yeah.
But he's been successful in many different systems, right? I mean, and I think one of the things is, he used to be about attracting good kids and good kids who would graduate.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think that kind of, as the world changed and people go to the NBA earlier, that really didn't work. And, then it took, I think, a lot of, you kind of have to be egoless in this arena. And then I think he embraced the idea of one and done. And, this year, obviously you're there. I think you guys have beat them 2 out of 3 times, but, they had the great recruiting class and all the Zion and all these one-on-one. So I think he's a really good role model for somebody who could have rested on a couple championships, but has continued to evolve himself and his approach and his philosophy and continues to be successful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, he continues to raise the level of experience and performance of his team. And we did win 2 out of 3 so far.
Yes. We
might meet again. I can't remember the bracket setup it is, but thanks to Nike too for that I'm glad he's okay. I'm really glad. He's an unbelievable player, Zion, but I was glad for a little reprieve there.
Yeah, you almost can't blame Nike, like a big sports guy, but he's just a freak athlete, and I don't think like a normal shoe would probably the things that he's able to do would be able to withstand that.
Exactly. I mean, he's ginormous too. So, but anyway. Last couple of questions here. Marketers tend to be students of other marketing. So I'm curious if there's any brands or companies or causes that you follow or you think other people should take notice of what they're doing.
Yeah. So I tend to be like really value brands, really be analytical, but I'm actually really inspired by the same stuff that inspires all of us, the stuff that's really courageous and brave and honestly hard to measure. So I don't know, the Colin Kaepernick ads from like a year ago, where it's just really risky to throw your weight behind him. So really courageous, experimental, breakthrough, bold stuff. That's the stuff that I would say really inspires me, just like anyone else, is just seeing work that's different and that's inspirational. But, as far as like brands that are kind of really know who they are and have this really successful formula, and I would say are probably brands that I emulate from a performance storytelling perspective would be like Geico and Southwest.
Yeah.
I think Geico knows who they are. I think they tell entertaining stories, but I think it's always like a call to action. 15 minutes to save you, 15% or more. And Southwest, same thing. I think they are fun. I think they develop engaging advertising, but I think they always leave you kind of with the core value proposition, which is you're going to save money by traveling with Southwest. So both ends of the spectrum inspire me.
Cool. Well, last question. What do you think the future of marketing is going to look like?
I think it's going to continue to be about accountability. I think it's going to continue to be where I talked about if you don't really have first party data and can't really own your data and your customers, I think you're in real trouble. So I think you'll continue to see that evolution of the marketers really I think the successful marketers will have to be able to not choose between being a brand marketer or a performance marketer. I think you'll have to be a performance storyteller going forward.
Awesome. Well, Ty, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Alan. Thank you.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with writing and editing by Kevin Greeley, social media support by Megan Woods, art and graphic design by Sarah Dell. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show.
I love to hear from listeners, and you can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes with links to anything we talk about on any episode. You can also search our archives.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.